Hi there, this is S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com on a Friday free-for-all, and I'm starting a little earlier than I originally intended, and I'm doing that because I was supposed to go to a Zoom Bible study, but I got to the Bible study and one other person was there, but not on one other person was in the Zoom call, and she wasn't by her desk and anywhere near it. I waited about 10 minutes and decided, okay, I guess I won't be doing the Bible study today, but what I am going to talk about is about socialism, capitalism. Going to talk about some other isms, perhaps maybe even atheism, and we're going to talk about some other takeaways from this book that I finished relatively recently, The Naked Communist, with respect to how Russia was operating in the last century. And we're going to talk about what the Bible says about these kind of topics. Like, what does the Bible say about capitalism? What does it say about religion in general? What does it say we should do? Okay, Jesus called on us to do two things: love the Lord above all else, and love our neighbors as ourselves. And that's really what we have to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, and this is a Friday free-for-all, by the way, so I'm going to be putting links into the chat, and we'll welcome people to come on in here if they want. So I want to mention a couple of things. The dictatorship of the proletariat. So here's what communists intended to do. Number one, completely suppress old capitalist class. Number two, create a mighty army of defense to be used for the consolidation of the ties with the proletariats of other lands and for the development of the victory of the revolution of all countries. Consolidate the unity of the masses in support of the dictatorship. Establish universal socialism by eliminating private property and preparing all mankind for the ultimate adoption of full communism. When Marx and Hegel conceived of Marxism, they knew that it was going to involve violence because, of course, it involves seizing people's private property from them. It's the idea that the government is going to have all the power. And to do so, what they did in the government of Russia was they eliminated an entire class of people. They decided they didn't like the wealthier. They didn't like the landowners. They didn't like what they called the bourgeoisie. So what did they do? They simply had them rounded up and thrown into prison for no good reason. Okay, that's what they did. And they also rounded up the religious because they did not like the religious folks. That was part of their plan. So, hey, Susan, great to see you in the chat here. So I want to mention some current communist goals. Now, current is from the 1960s. These goals go back. And you guys think about some of these as, have they been fulfilled? Because in many cases, they have, sadly. U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war, develop the illusion that the total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. Now, we cannot get rid of our military. That's something, fortunately, that especially Republicans have emphasized. Our military is really important. And we can see that today because I was told by Rob Rowe, and he's from Australia, he says that there's some indication that China has been sort of exercising its muscles around Australia. Now, why wouldn't the communists in China want to take over Australia or take over some other countries? That's what communists do. In fact, China was formed as an extension or a satellite to the USSR. Okay, so here's what we go. Extension of long-term loans to Russia and the Soviet satellites. Provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. Grant recognition of Red China. Admission of China to the UN. China, let's think about this. China has imprisoned, I mention this almost every single video I make. They have imprisoned 1.8 million Uyghurs, which is Muslims, in a concentration camp in China, and they're torturing them, they're murdering them, they're raping them, they're sterilizing them, they're doing all sorts of egregious things. And guess what? Guess what Joe Biden says about that? He says it's their culture. Okay, that's about as wimpy and weak as it could possibly get. Really, really sad. Set up East and West Germany as separate states. Now, we had that sort of thing happen. We know that, fortunately, in 1989, President Reagan stood in front and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear this wall down. And then we saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. And we've started to see countries around the world sort of opening up to this idea of free markets. And that's actually a very good thing. You want free markets because we want to have free trade. That puts the wealth in the hands of the people when there's free trade. Okay, the idea of capitalism actually is a very good, very biblical idea. And I'm going to explain that in a few ways with some passages. But this idea that we have free markets, that means the businessman. Now, 89% of U.S. businesses have 20 or less employees. Okay. Most of the businesses in the United States have some very few employees, relatively speaking. And we have about 98% of, now let me think here. 98, I think it's 99 or 98%, I'm forgetting right now, of businesses in the United States have fewer than 500 employees. And I can't remember if it's 98 or 99%, but anyway, so it's a big percentage. Most businesses are relatively small. So what else do we have here? Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. I mean, they actually have a whole bunch of different things. Now, I'm just going to mention a few more. I'm not going to get everything in here, but listen to this. Get control of the schools. Communists want control of the schools. Look what's going on in our school system right now, what they're teaching our kids. They were able to eliminate prayer from public schools, which I think is really shameful. I think it's ushered in some of the violence that we've seen in the schools. Get control of all student newspapers. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. You know, the Black Lives Matter group is headed up by people who know and admit they're trained Marxists. Okay, they're trained Marxists. That is very dangerous. Now, what does it mean to be a trained Marxist? It means you endorse these kind of ideas. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. We've certainly seen a lot of far leftists in Hollywood, so they're doing a good job with that. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. Now, that's a real shame, but we certainly have seen that in some of our museums. You go into some museums and you see it looks like trash sitting there, and they're exalting that as if it's some sort of decent artwork. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. So they don't want to see the obscene. Instead, what we're seeing today is the elimination, or the call for the elimination, of people like Dr. Seuss's books and Bugs Bunny characters. You know, Pepe Le Pew, oh, so dangerous, so threatening. Speedy Gonzalez, he's fast. Oh my gosh, that's too much. We can't show a fast little cartoon. I mean, this is ridiculous what's going on today. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Again, really destructive stuff. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Now, we have definitely seen some trends towards that. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Okay, we have seen this growth of progressive Christianity. This is a wolves in sheep's clothing, okay? That's what the progressive Christians are. Anyone who endorses universalism is going outside of what it says quite specifically in the Bible. It doesn't say we're all going to be universally reconciled to God at one point. You can see that in numerous passages, especially going to Revelation. There is an annihilation. There is a judgment day, and those who are not right with God are going to be judged harshly. It's just the true, simple thing that's going on. So slam, yes, I saw yesterday where in New York City schools they were discouraging young students from saying mom and dad to their own parents. This is just outrageous. And where are people? Why aren't people protesting against this? I mean, I see a little bit of protest. Like I see Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles doing the right thing. And hey, Converse, I'll say hi to you too. I'm just going to go ahead and post this open link in case anyone wants to join me. So where else are we? Let's see. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. Discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. Now, we have certainly seen this. We've seen these people tear down statues of Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, because they say he was a slave owner. Well, sure, but he was also a founding father. We've seen him tear down a statue of Abraham Lincoln, of all people. Here's the man who single-handedly, I shouldn't say single-handedly, but he abolished slavery. And they're tearing him down too. They're completely ludicrous. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions. Now, we certainly have seen that with the teachers union. Really scary stuff. Union representation. If you're in private business in the United States, only about 6% of private businesses are unionized, thankfully. Okay. Unfortunately, some of the unionized places are some of the least competitive companies around. Okay, so heavy unionization up in places like Flint, Michigan, in the automotive industry has really destroyed a lot of the automotive industry. And as far as making Ford, Chrysler, and GM more competitive against other sorts of companies, Toyota's got plants down in Texas. Why is that? Well, Texas is a right to work state, just like Florida, meaning that if I go to work at a company, and there's a union in the company representing people in that company, I don't necessarily have to join that union. Okay, so it's lower levels of unionization. Now, if you say, where's the highest unionization and the lowest? In New York City, New York is the highest level of unionization in the country, and South Carolina and North Carolina are the lowest. Okay, so New York is heavily unionized. Now, if you're in public, like you're a teacher, a K through 12 teacher, or you're a firefighter or policeman, you're more likely to be unionized. Okay, so really around over 30% of people in the public sector are unionized. But anyway, okay, so discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Well, we've certainly seen that. Okay, we've certainly seen that. So hi, Alex, and everybody, blessings to you guys too. So this is just to give you a taste of some of the stuff that I see coming out of the naked communists, which is really scary. But I want to read to you a few passages from the Bible that tell us how we're supposed to actually live that is not consistent with communism. Okay, we're recognized as individuals. We're told in Genesis 1:27 that we're made in the image of God, as man and women in the image of God. Okay, we're also told that God blesses marriages. He told us from the start. He loves the idea of a male and a female coming together as one in a marriage and then bearing children. That's the ideal, the family unit. And what we're seeing today, unfortunately, is a lot of people are getting easy divorces, or they're not even getting married to start with. That's just a recipe for poverty. Okay, some of the inner cities where there's the most poverty, there's in some groups the divorce rates, or even the marital rates, the chances of being raised in a single family in a Black inner city culture is about over 60%. Okay, so that's the breakdown of the American family. We really need to go and encourage people to get married, have kids. That's what you're naturally supposed to do. So one of the things about communism, again, is there's a huge dichotomy between the ultra powerful government versus the non-powerful plebeians, the lesser folk. Okay, and so this is what God says about that, about these people who take money away, take property away from others. Isaiah 3:14 says, "The Lord enters into judgment against the elders and leaders of his people. It is you who have ruined my vineyard. The plunder from the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor, declares the Lord." Okay, so the Lord says that we should be distributing money equally. Okay, if you're a wealthy business owner, if you're what's my hair doing here? If you're somebody like Jeff Bezos, who has sitting on $200 billion, and you have done a nice minimum wage, at least it's $15 at Amazon. But I've looked at how Amazon, actually I did a case study. I just submitted it yesterday to a journal. Let's see if it gets accepted. But I did this case study on Amazon, and I looked at the treatment there. They've got surveillance cameras. People feel like they're just worked to death. I mean, they work 12-hour days, and they're only allowed to take a half hour worth of breaks, and they're being monitored by a camera. So it's pretty scary. So I want to say hi to Converse Contender.
Hey, SJ, how are you?
How are you?
Hey, I'm good.
Pretty good.
My service isn't great, so I might be spotty.
Okay. So yeah, I was just talking about things like socialism and communism, and I also just want to make quick mention. Each person in the United States effectively is paying $5,792 to get a $1,400 check. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I think you and I are pretty similar on our politics. Like we both are kind of centrist kind of, but you want to be able to recognize that the right also has some good arguments and the left has good arguments, So
yeah.
Yeah. So, but I would say I think you're right on a lot of things. Like you were talking about taking down some statues because something done immoral in the past. But like, if you think about it, Martin Luther King, who's one of my heroes, right? Was he was people call him a misogynist, right? So maybe we should take down his statues because of his attitude toward women,
and he cheated on his wife.
it's just,
So, I mean, should we take him down because of
yeah.
that?
So I
Everybody's
mean, but
flawed.
the other thing is like it's hard for me to see the argument to punish people for things that in their time wasn't.
That's exactly it. It was a norm. Like if you
But
go
we know
back,
later that they're.
yeah. I mean, I bet you go to our great grandparents and great grandparents, there are probably definitely some racist activities that they would be, if they were around today, would be very embarrassed about.
Yeah, just imagine like a leftist leader today, right? And say she's for abortion, and then in the future generations, say 100 years from now, are like appalled that she would have supported the killing of babies because of some new science breakthrough, and then they are like, we need to take down her statue or whatever because of that. Well, like, you know, that's kind of the thing is like, are you going to equally apply that throughout time so that all the statues that go up today, majority of them can be taken down tomorrow? Like, you know,
That's so true. And actually, speaking of the abortion topic, this is the craziest thing. So if you're a turtle egg or you're an eagle egg, you have more rights than an unborn child. So you actually, if you destroy a turtle or an eagle egg, and eagles are no longer, they've been off the endangered list since 2007. If you destroy one of those eggs in the United States, you could go to prison and pay a huge fine.
well, you know what's interesting about that, and this is something that I, learned in college, so it may vary state to state. Um, but I get it depends on the preference of the woman, right? What the severity of the punishment is, because if you think about it, in some states, I don't remember how many, but killing a pregnant woman is double homicide, right? So you get charged for the life of the child as well. But that's basically assuming that the woman wants the child, right? But if she didn't want the child, you wouldn't. Then she wouldn't get charged with homicide because of her preference to not wanting it. So that seems to
Wow.
me to be an
That
interesting
seems
argument as
awfully
well.
awful. Yeah, that is really interesting. Now, I did know that and I can't remember which states have which laws, but I do know that there's some states where they don't consider killing a pregnant woman a double homicide.
Yeah, that's why it's been a long time since I have looked into this. I'm not sure of the states, but I believe my state did.
Yeah. Yeah, and now what state are you in, Converse?
I'm in South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, the least unionized state.
Yeah, and like I feel like sometimes I need to take up for the right, and then sometimes I need to take up for the left because you know anybody who's really fair and like open minded to like in politics, like the I would just say that people just blanketly say like, well, like they'll charge the right with some like you know thing that people on the right are supposed to adhere to, but also on the left as well, because like I have actually been down to like the lower part of the state to a like to a party, right, where one of my black friends that were with me, they wanted to um, you know try to exclude him from coming in. Now, this has been 10 years or so ago, but then we got into it with them because of that. And then also they were calling us city slickers because we were from the north part of the state. And I'm like, what? I grew up in the country. Like, like, you know, I actually did grow up like in the country area. So I would just like to say though that these are not representative of your average person, though, right? This is some backwoods person that had not had very much social interaction. And then the same thing happens though when I was in my right before college and then in my college years. I used to hang out with a bunch of black nationalists that were basically like Hebrew Israelites, and they kind of did very similar things. Like it was almost like they were the like mirror image of the other. So, but I would never say that like they all are going to believe this, right? Like, you got to just judge people based on their individuals.
Yeah, and I think you're pointing out a couple of good distinctions that I think we should talk about. But like, there's an urban rural distinction definitely between people, and that there's a divide in politics. Like, if you're in an urban city, if you're in a big city, you're much more likely to be a Democrat, and if you're in the country, you're more likely to be a Republican. And if you're in the city, you're more likely to be very liberal, kind of left in values, and you're probably more likely to be higher in what they call openness to experience. And if you're in the country, you're more likely to be high in conservatism and less tolerance for change and diversity. And those are the people, because I think a lot of times they don't even interact with people of other cultures so much. So they kind of develop this animosity towards them, and a we versus a they thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. The openness to like the personality trait openness, right? And we were talking about this on Discord the other night, and I was just kind of mentioning that, like, the personality trait openness, we were saying that is good. And I was like, it's not that it's good or bad, right? It depends on where you're at. Because same with conscientiousness or some other traits, like, you don't want to be all the way at the top of those traits. You want to try to be midway, or, a little more than midway or something like that, right? Because, um, like, if you're so high in openness that you're open to a 50-year-old potentially being in love with a 6-year-old or something like that, I would say that's not good. But if by openness you mean you're open to your opinion being proven wrong and open to new ideas, that's fine. Like, that's a healthy thing, right?
Hmm.
Um, Same
Yeah,
with
yeah, that's
conscientiousness.
the Yeah, I think it's very good to be high in conscientiousness, because that's the number one predictor of job performance. And I speak from a teaching perspective. And openness is very good for creativity. And then a combination of openness and conscientiousness can be pretty good, because that would probably speak against the going for the 50-year-old with the 6-year-old or
All
something like
right.
that.
That's kind of what I'm pointing out, is like, you want to have a balance of, like, of the traits, like in neuroticism and some of the others, but like, even in conscientiousness, like, when you say, like, being high in conscientiousness, that is a good thing, right? For it leans toward industriousness and orderliness and things like that. You'll see a lot of military types like that. But then again, if you look at the far, like, top of conscientiousness, like with the Nazis and people like that, like, every step had to be, like, in place. Every badge had to be the exact same. Like anything from out of the norm. And Peterson talks about this. Their disgust sensitivity was, like, off the charts, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
things can
gets
be
us
too
into
high and low.
that gets us into moral foundations theory too, because I did want to talk about that a little bit today. But that same thing, going back to the distinctions between the urban and the rural, and the idea of political divides, and moral foundations theory that Jonathan Haidt has advocated, and also Graham and Nozick. These are a couple other last names that have written papers on this. But they talk about that the people who are on the left tend to emphasize care versus harm. So they're really focused on caring and really focused on avoiding harm, and also very focused on fairness. But then they're not really that focused on these other dimensions. Like, they're not terribly focused on patriotism and loyalty and authority. And so you can see that. You can actually see that. That's why Trump was able to play up to his base, because the Republicans and conservatives tend to emphasize those things more evenly. So you see that people referring to themselves as patriots, because it's like virtue signaling. It's saying, hey, I'm a patriot, you're a patriot. We share that commonality. Therefore, we're for Trump. So.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I agree with you. That's kind of why I said, like, you want to be a mixture, right? Because, like, um, so I don't know. I guess I would say, like, the artist that is really high in creativity, like, that's really good, right? But their studio, like, they can't find anything because it's just like a mess. And so there are, like, benefits to both. And one thing that Peterson pointed out that was really interesting is, like, he said that people who are high in conscientiousness tend to, like, be able to order businesses and things like that. But it's the creative types that are high in openness that tend to start businesses, because they come up with a new creative idea but he was pointing out that like it's like they need each other, because typically when the person that's really creative, like the artist, wants to start a business with this new creative idea, they typically are a mess, or not in all cases, but they don't want to have to organize the business and promote it and market it and like understand all the factors that go into like running it. For the conscientious type, they're more likely to go with tried and true things than creativity of like some new thing, and they're more likely to be able to manage, that. So I feel like they do need each other in a certain way.
Yeah, we had a former dean when I first came to my university. We had a dean who was there, and they said pinning him down on something was like nailing Jello to a wall. It was because he was really good at strategizing and planning and coming up with all these new ideas, but he needed other people to implement those ideas for him and to carry them out. And so I remember one of the women he hired to do a lot of this stuff for him. She's former military, very, very organized. I mean, I still work with her today. She's still there. The dean left actually a long time ago, but I still work with her, and she's so incredibly organized, and it was perfect. I mean, just like you said, you got to balance out the two different personality types.
Yeah, and I think that it's like that in your own life as well. Like you need to be able to balance that in your own life, because some people who are really creative, they don't do their laundry very often and things like that. And I think that's why Peterson's. Sorry about the noise. I'm about to have to go because I'm about to pull up to I'm getting a haircut.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, sorry, but yeah, I think that's why Peterson's 12 Rules for Life kind of appeal to people, is because it has that like, clean your room before you criticize the world kind of thing. And it's like, a lot of people who have kind of neglected the aspects in their life. One other example that I thought of is like, I had a friend that was like all day talking about, like, they'll give you all day their politics and like how the world can't, Trump can't, he doesn't know what to do. He's doing everything wrong, and then Biden's doing everything wrong, and they know exactly what's wrong with everybody, but then they cut somebody off in traffic, and like, don't even feel sorry for anything, or like, just turn in front of somebody and do things like that. And I'm just like, the person knows exactly what's wrong with everybody else, but does these things routinely that seem to be, I would call like, unethical, or just like, not a good thing to do. But yeah, so I think that's why
Yeah, I
Peterson
know that.
works
Well, that's
so
what some of the political commentators do, is they spend all their time criticizing, and it's like Benjamin Franklin said, any fool can condemn, complain, and criticize, and most fools do. So,
That's exactly right. Well, I'll tune in here in a few. I'm go get a haircut.
oh well, happy haircut.
Good to talk to you, Shay.
All right, good to talk to you too. So yeah, so that was great having Converse on. Again, this is a free for all, you guys, just in case you don't know that. But I wanted to mention a couple of things. Actually, I'll show you what I have behind me. That's a picture from this morning while riding my bike, and so I had a beautiful view. I actually have another picture too to upload at some point that's of a bridge that I think is pretty nice too. So here's another version of what God says about the rich, and I'm talking specifically. I'm picking on some of these big business owners that do have millions and millions of dollars, and in like Jeff Bezos' case, billions of dollars, $200 billion. The Tesla, Elon Musk, also has $200 billion. I mean, these people are worth a ton of money, and actually I'll call out some others. Joel Osteen is worth millions of dollars. He lives in a $10 million mansion. And John MacArthur apparently also is worth millions. And so is Ray Comfort, worth millions. And a lot of these ideas, they don't really, I mean, they're kind of, as I said, if I ever had a windfall of money, I actually would feel inclined to give it away, because I don't want to be the camel that's trying to get squeezed through the needle. So, because this is what Jesus said. He said, just then a man came up to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?" "Why do you ask me about what is good?" Jesus replied. And then, so they went on, and then it says, Jesus said, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. So a lot of that happens. And so we also saw in the book of Acts where a lot of people willingly gave up their possessions for the greater common good. That happened a lot in Acts, and they gave it up for the greater common good to help the needy. And so we saw that kind of thing. So that's what the Gospels instruct. Now here's a parable. I just want to mention one of my favorite parables. Hold on. Here it is. Here's a parable from Matthew that tells us why I think that God really values the idea of investing and investing in our spiritual gifts. And if we do, we'll reap rewards. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned the settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you know that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even from what they will have, will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, what is the message there? The message is God is certainly not. He is not in agreement with this idea of Marxism. All right, He gives us different gifts. You know, we consider us equal. In the United States Constitution, we refer to all men as created equal. And we have equal rights and equal opportunities. That's the idea of equality. It's not equality of outcomes. Okay, equality of outcomes is inherently evil. Okay, God doesn't give us equal gifts. You know, someone's taller, some shorter, some are better looking than other people, some are smarter, some study harder, some have higher levels of conscientiousness innately because a lot of that is inherited. Okay, so some come that way. People are made different ways. But God wants us to use those gifts that He gives us in whatever He gives us and to invest in it. And to try to take other people's money away from them and not pay them fairly is wrong. So I will talk about the ugly underbelly of capitalism. When you get too much wealth or you're running these big companies, you're also expected, to whom much has been given, much is expected. You're expected to do things for the greater of society. Okay, I think it's wonderful that Bill Gates formed the Gates Foundation, and they're giving a lot of money away to African countries to try to get rid of disease down there. I think that's wonderful. I love the fact that Warren Buffett, also someone I really admire in a lot of ways, Warren Buffett has pledged 83% of his wealth to Bill Gates, the Bill Gates Foundation, because he's also giving back. I love the fact that Buffett lives in the same house he lived in from the get-go. I love Sam Walton's values. You know, what a shame that Sam Walton died from Walmart, because the people who've taken it over since him are paying themselves way more than he ever earned ever. Walton refused to get paid more than $350,000. Okay. Ran Walmart. He did a great job running Walmart, instilled some really important values in his people. Drove around in the same old beat up truck that he had from the 70s. He just drove it around. He didn't have this desire to increase his wealth or anything like that. Lived in the same house. Okay. He did a really good job. Ben and Jerry's owners, same idea. They didn't decide they're going to take all kinds of money away, and they made it a thing that they were not going to be paid any more than, I think, 7 times their average workers pay. I think that's great. But then you go back to Walmart. Now, here's what Walmart does. Walmart, the pay for the average workers at Walmart is around $9 or $10. I think it's $10 or $11 right now. So it's around $10 or $11. They made a minimum wage of, I believe, $10. Okay, so average workers don't make too much money, but the CEOs are making, average pay of CEOs in these big Fortune 500 companies here in the United States is around $14 million a year. So the question is, and I've looked at these averages over the years, since 2002, I've pulled these data, and the question is, how much harder are the CEOs working than the average workers? If you go onto those shows on TV, the boss show, Undercover Boss, where they go in, a lot of times the CEOs or the top management team doesn't even realize how hard the people are working on their team. So a lot of times those bosses will come in and they'll give back. And I think that's right. I think that you should make sure that your workers are paid very well. Here in the United States, we've got a lot of great things going on. We've got free markets. We've got the ability to succeed. We've got the idea that it doesn't matter where you were born. We love rags to riches stories. We love that here. I mean, that's not something you see in other societies. If you talk to anyone who's from India, and I've talked to hundreds of people from India, even though they've officially eliminated the caste system, they all know what their caste is. They know exactly where they stand in their society. Okay, they know where their family has stood over the generations in their society, because you can't change your caste. That's the one you're born into. And that was one way for the government and the leaders a long time ago to suppress people. And so that's another thing that is wrong. Now, I'm going to go back to my little communism book. So I also want to say hi. Thank you, Jesus. I think I'm subscribed to your channel. Yeah, I'm going to have to go look and see if I'm subscribed to Thank You, Jesus's channel. And if Gerald, if you have a channel, you guys, we should know about that. We should try to find you guys. So I'm just mentioning a couple of other things. Listen to this one. Number 39, dominate the psychiatric profession. Now, this is communist goals, and this came from the 1960s, and you can tell me what you think. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who approve or oppose communist goals. The psychiatric profession in 2015 changed the laws or the views on the transgender groups, okay, gender dysphoria and all that kind of stuff. They changed views back then. Very interesting. Discredit the family, as I mentioned before, that's something that we should really push back against. That's how we're going to come back to how we used to be, to our better days, okay? Our probably glory days, I'll bet you if people lived in the 1960s, they were pretty frightened over the crazies in society at that time. The 1960s had people saying things like, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. There was all kinds of drugs. Finally, birth control was available. People were celebrating that by having sex with everybody. Abortion started to become legalized in many states in the 60s. And then finally in 1973, as you know, it's Roe v. Wade was passed. And since then, 60 million babies, innocent unborn babies, have been slaughtered, which is the same size as a country of Italy. That's how gross this is. Country of Italy has about the same number of people who've been murdered here in the United States in the past since 1973. So emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents, attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. This is something the communists did. A lot of times they actually separated kids from their parents. At one rule that they had in place for a while there was after a child's born, after a month, they had to be separated and put it into schooling through the Russian system, and they couldn't go back and reunite with their parents till the age of 17. I mean, there were some really crazy things going on. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition, that students and special interest groups should rise up and use united force to solve economic, political, or social problems. Okay, these are other problems. Now, I want to go back to my example with Walmart and just mention something. So the CEOs and top management team of Walmart, you can find out what anybody makes at a publicly traded company in the top. You can find out what the top people make if you just go into their annual reports. They actually have to report the top earners in organizations. Now, if you want to find out how much a private firm is making, if it's a nonprofit firm, you can go to a place called GuideStar for free, and you can look up what's your president. If you're working at a nonprofit, you can look up what people make. Now, typically, for-profit CEOs average way more money than nonprofit CEOs. So usually the nonprofit CEO is maybe top somewhere between $600 and $1 million a year, which is a lot of money, but that's typically what you'll see in the nonprofits. But the for-profits make quite a bit more, like I mentioned, in the Fortune 500 companies. Now, of course, I must mention 57% of people in the United States are working for these larger companies, but the vast majority of companies themselves have 20 or fewer people. Okay, so 89% have 20 or fewer people. So just going back to a couple of other things that I want to mention. One of the big divides in the United States and the things that's happened is in the 1950s, we had our highest levels of unionization in the United States. Now, one side benefit, and I will mention there are some benefits to some extent of unionization, is workers who are unionized tend to average about $200 more in a paycheck per week than non-unionized workers. So they do a lot better financially. It's better for a person to be in a union because you have collective representation. Okay, you have to pay union dues. That's still part of the deal. But you have collective representation. In some cases, that works out really to their benefit. In fact, New York teachers, school teachers, make much more money than Florida school teachers. Okay, this is just one example. Florida, as I mentioned before, is a right-to-work state, so you don't necessarily have to join a union. Now, I'm personally against unions because I feel like that takes away a lot of the freedom of management to be able to punish poor performance and eliminate workers who don't perform. But, and I'm very much for the idea of giving merit to people who perform really well. Hard workers should be recognized. The Lord said that right in the parable of the gold that I just mentioned to you. Okay, so here's some other things. Overthrow all colonial governments before native populations are ready for self-government. I mean, these people come up with this stuff. So these are the communists. We mentioned a few of these. Infiltrate the press, get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, and policy-making positions. Infiltrate the press. You know, at first when Donald Trump used to talk about the mainstream media and all that kind of stuff, I didn't take him seriously. I didn't vote for him in 2016. I was like, oh, please, what is he talking about? And then I started to notice things going on with CNN and MSNBC, and I started to look twice at it and think, wait a second, some of the stuff that these guys are saying and not saying, you know, what do they choose to report on and not report on? And I'm noticing certain things aren't showing up in the news today, and you have to dig around to find what's really going on. And we have a hell of a lot of censorship going on with Twitter and with Facebook, okay? In fact, the whole thing that happened in Washington, D.C., a lot of that was funneled through Facebook, not Parler, okay? So then these media outlets are able to get rid of Parler and not Facebook. You know, they're playing favorites right there for the same reason that they should have actually looked at Facebook. Now, just consider the fact that Amazon, in all of its wealth and glory, Amazon owns Washington Post and is a huge influence in the media. And a lot of people have made suggestions that Jeff Bezos, who's stepping down from Amazon, by the way, but Jeff Bezos doesn't really care about the stuff that he advocates. Like Amazon's constantly trying to virtue signal that's putting out some really good ideas and trying to help the populace, but that he just sort of is just getting on that bandwagon to make Amazon look good. But when you dig into it, which I did in writing up a case, I looked at Amazon and I looked at some of its employment practices and I thought, you know, they look good on the outside. You go to their website and you read up on what they're doing for their employees and some of these training programs that they're offering and things like that. Those are great. And I like the fact that they raise the minimum wage to $15. I think that's great. I like the idea that a company should be able to make the decision to raise the minimum wage rather than the government making the decision. But like in the state of Florida, our people voted to raise the minimum wage to $15 over time. And so we're going to see a minimum wage in the next handful of years coming up to $15 per hour here in Florida. And I've actually been against that idea. You know, they don't have a minimum wage in the Nordic countries, in case you're wondering. But businesses do tend to pay pretty well, people in those Nordic countries. And that's one of the things that as a populace that we can do is to really motivate our big businesses to pay the employees really well. But also just to remember, as I was a small business owner for many years, small businesses do not have it that easy, okay? Small business owners aren't sitting there with piles of cash to be able to give out to people. And so there probably is going to be an economic impact on small businesses that have a hard time affording that $15 an hour. A lot of them are trying to scrap to make ends meet. You know, we were selling furniture for many years down in Southeast Florida, and we had ups and we had downs, and it really depended on the economy because people don't necessarily need furniture. It's a luxury item. And so that's one of the things that we went into. We went into a different business down there now. We sold that business a long time ago, actually right at the right time. We sold and got out of that business, and my family ended up going into an equipment rental business, which is a wonderful business, I can say. And it's something that was funny because every hurricane that would occur, business would be better for us, strangely enough, because people would need this big equipment, scissor lifts and all the different kind of stuff that my brothers have. They needed that big equipment to take care of things. And so that was something that they were able to get into, and that's been a very, very good business for them. So just to make mention of a few more things. So I want to say hi too to people in the chat. I think the canceled one is Dalton. I think that's what I saw the canceled one say. And I see Slam still here. She says, however, the pension funds for the public sector teachers are bankrupting cities, and now they want to pass a 1.9 trillion mostly. Yeah, that's the thing, Slam. I don't remember if I mentioned this, but I think I did. So it's costing each person. Now there's about 328 million people in the United States. So if you just take 1.9 trillion and divide it by 328 million, it'll come out to about $5,792 per person. So there's a lot of pork. Okay, it's a lot of pork. And I looked into the breakdown. In fact, let me just look at the breakdown really quickly to take a look at that. So let's see what we have here is the breakdown of the plan. So let's put the number in context. So hard to find it. Well, they're giving a lot of money to the schools. They're giving money to, they say that the minimum wage could rise. They're looking at things like that. They're giving money to transportation. They're giving money to the states. They're giving a lot of money. The big issue, though, is, the big issue, though, that we need to think about, you guys, is where is this money coming from? So we're each going to get $1,400, and I'm not going to send it back. In fact, I'm going to get more than that because I'm in a family of 4, and apparently we're each getting $1,400 in our family. So that's a lot of money, $5,600. That's pretty sweet, actually. But it's costing each person over that. It's costing each person $5,700 and change. Okay, so that's a lot of money. And I say, how do we get that, and what's going to happen to society? Well, when you flush society with money, usually what happens is inflation. Okay, so flushing society with money a lot of times results in inflation. So that means prices go up. Okay, so prices go up, and we had the highest levels of inflation in the 1970s. And I don't know exactly what led to that because I was pretty small back then, and I haven't really studied that era. But the 60s, as I mentioned, were a crazy time. I would be afraid to live in the 60s. The 70s were kind of a correction time, except we had a really awful succession of presidents. And so Jimmy Carter was a downright disaster. During Jimmy Carter's administration, we had 18% interest rates. 18% on a home mortgage. Can you imagine that? Right now, people have like 2%, 3% on a home mortgage. That's unheard of. In fact, my first home mortgage I bought was in 1993, and it was 7% fixed rate over 30 years. And I thought I had won the lotto with that kind of rate. I thought that was such a good deal. Okay, now we're seeing way, way lower rates. The problem with this kind of thing is for the savers. In the old days, when the interest rates are so high, you're also making a lot of interest on your savings accounts. Okay, but when interest rates are really low, you don't make barely anything on your savings accounts. And so that's the deal. But it also means, with inflation, it also means rising prices. Now, here came 1980s. Okay, who was our president back in the United States in the 1980s? A very beloved, the most beloved president I think that we've had, Ronald Reagan. And one of the reasons why he was beloved is because he said things like, get the government off the people's back. And I noticed that all the people who are pro-choice have already been born. He had a bunch of really one-liners that were just wonderful. People wanted to be just like Ronald Reagan, too. There was this show called Family Ties with Michael J. Fox playing Alex Keaton. And Alex Keaton was this young kid running around in a suit and having conservative ideas and conservative values. And I was raised as a Republican who admired Ronald Reagan. He got us away from that skyrocketing inflation, and he really reeled a lot of that in. He took a particular liking to this book, Naked Communism. And he actually says right here, you will be alarmed. This is him. This is Ronald Reagan's quote right here. You will be alarmed, you will be informed, and you'll be glad you heard. Okay, that's what Ronald Reagan said. So he was so loved that in his second term, when he ran for office against Walter Mondale, he collected all but 6 of the Electoral College votes. Imagine that, all but 6. And that's pretty significant. So I see here, yeah. So Susan remembers something that I remember too. Let me just get this out here. Susan says, I remember the 70s. It was gasoline prices. OPEC raised prices. I ended up in the Army because the dental lab I worked in couldn't afford to keep us all on. People were not getting dentures, etc. Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting thing. So thank you so much for your military service. I always admire people who are willing to do that. My uncle served in the military. I named my son after him. And he went over to Vietnam. And unfortunately, that devastated his mind, mental state. And so just a few years after he got back, he ended up dying at the young age of 29. And we don't know exactly what took his life, but we've had different theories on it. At one point, we thought it was double pneumonia, and at other points, we thought maybe it was meningitis or something. But anyway, so he had died, and that was just a real tragedy in our family. But anyway, so going back to what the Bible says. So I just wanted to mention, with respect to our topic of the day, which is socialism, capitalism, and those sorts of things. So I just want to mention another verse here. Okay, so this is a lot of people have tried to make the argument that Jesus was a socialist, and they make it based on this passage. So let's go through it. I'm in Acts 5, verse 22 or verse 30 through. All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And God's grace was so powerfully at work in them, all that there were no needy persons among them. From time to time, those who owned land and houses sold them, bought the money from the sales, and put it in the apostles' feet. And it was distributed to anyone who had need. So Joseph of Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. Now, saying that this is socialist is not understanding exactly what socialism entails. Socialism entails, like if we're looking at democratic socialism, we're looking at this idea of collective ownership. Okay, it's this idea that the factors of production will be managed by an elected government. That's essentially what socialism in the democratic form is. Now, as practiced in communist Russia, what they did was the government just took everything over, took all the farms over, took all the land. There was no private property, no property rights. They took the rights away from everybody. And when you're going to do something like that, they knew it was going to be violent. But this is different than what's in the Bible. What's in the Bible is people are voluntarily giving their money to help. It's like when you voluntarily give your money to the church to help out other people. That's a beautiful thing. So we know from the parable of the talents or the parable of the gold that there's unequal distributions. There's equal opportunities here in the United States and in many parts of the world. And there is not equality of outcomes. There's nothing in the Bible that makes it that the government is supposed to be taking over and taking away from people unjustly. In fact, the Bible calls out these wealthy, greedy, people by saying it's easier to squeeze a needle through. Easier to squeeze a camel through a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. Now, of course, the next line is all God can do anything. Everything's possible with God. But I want to make clear that there's a couple of points here. So Jesus was very scornful towards people who were greedy to the disadvantage of others, people who didn't fairly pay others, as I just mentioned from the book of Isaiah. So if you're an employer, you should really make sure your employees are taken care of. I teach that in my classes. It's so important, taking care of your employees. And we have a lot of companies. I mentioned the ones that are sort of bad players out there. But we actually have a lot of good players too, like Zappos. Zappos is a little subunit of Amazon, but they operate independently. There was a person named Tony Hsieh who unfortunately passed away in a house fire last year, who was the CEO of Zappos for a long time. He stepped down in August, and things went really bad for him after that. But for a while there, he was working at Zappos, and he had this policy that he would put people through extensive training for weeks, and then at the end of the training, he put them all in this thing, and they all, they recognized their award for going through the training, and they were given great recognition and all that kind of thing. And then he told them, okay, now if you want to leave, here's the number. It's we'll give you $2,000 to leave. Okay. Some people actually took that money, but the vast majority didn't take the money. And he did that to make sure he had very committed employees. Now, Zappos is a role model. A lot of companies go over to Zappos, a lot of HR people especially go into Zappos in Las Vegas to see exactly what they're doing and how they are engaging their employees. You might not know this, but year after year, Gallup collects data on employees in the United States. And they found that 53% of, wait a second, I'm saying that wrong. Let me backtrack a bit. 30% of employees in the United States, year after year, are highly engaged. These are the ones who are doing the hard work, the heavy lifting, and who you should recognize. You should single them out and recognize them. The United States, we appreciate that. This isn't like Japan where they say the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. This is the States. We appreciate individual recognition. 53% of your employees are just kind of hanging out there, just putting in their time, but not terribly engaged. And 17% of your employees have malicious intentions against your organization. Now, that's on average from thousands of people who've been surveyed from Gallup from all kinds of different companies. But if I go to a company like Zappos, you can see that they've really mastered this idea of engagement. It looks like just about everyone is engaged at Zappos. And they're encouraged. They're hired because they really emphasize, let me distinguish them from Amazon. Amazon emphasizes customers. It's all about the customer, but nothing is really mentioned about the employees at Amazon's website. It's all about the customer, the mission, the vision, the goals, all about the customer. But Zappos, unlike Amazon, is all about people, whether it's the customer, the employees, the community. Zappos is very focused on people. And that is a better mission, to be focused on people and to also really emphasize your employees. In these times with COVID and the stress that a lot of people have gone through, and depression and suicides and all that kind of terrible stuff we're seeing out there, just this making mention of unity and employees and workers and making sure that people feel that their well-being is being taken care of, that's really important in companies. So that's something that's out there. I have been asked by Brazilian executives multiple times when we've gone through these training sessions. We bring them over to our campus at the University of Tampa. And I've been asked by them multiple times. They say things like, why is it that, we have pretty much the same, similar histories in Brazil and the United States in similar ways. Came to the Americas, most of us came from Europe, European countries and that kind of thing. Like, why is it different? Why are the systems different in the United States? Well, we can take somebody like Max Weber and the Protestant work ethic and the spirit of capitalism to look at some of that. Okay. Max Weber actually distinguished between, he looked at Ben Franklin ideals, and he looked at this idea that people wanted to work really hard and value industriousness and emphasize and not mind if you accumulated goods and that kind of thing. He distinguished that from Catholicism. He said they're more focused on the other world and the meek will inherit the world. And they build gigantic churches, whereas the Protestants are much more thrifty. And he looked at those kind of things. But he said that our big emphasis on this idea of capitalism and industriousness and wealth accumulations, surplus, all that kind of thing. He said a lot of that is why the United States has distinguished itself. But there's more than that. There's a book called Culture Matters, which was written by a bunch of very high-level people. It's a really good book. And they looked at the elites in South America, and they looked at what people were sort of valuing in South America. And in many of the countries of South America, a lot of them have these goals that were more in alignment with power and this idea that the government should give a lot of handouts and the government should really help you. And Brazil's been operated by people who've been since judged as very corrupt and that kind of thing. Right now, they've got, and I'm forgetting his name, Bolsonaro in office. He's kind of like the Donald Trump of Brazil. But they, in prior times, have had people who are much more focused on socialist ideas. And once you start handing people money, this is where I'm getting to. Once you start giving people money, in Brazil, I found out, because I actually was working with a Brazilian for a while. He came to our school too. He was working on his dissertation when he was at my school, and I was helping him out. I mean, I wasn't helping him write his dissertation, but I was helping him with some ideas. And he told me that in Brazil, you get a lot of money from the government for having more kids. So a lot of people want to have more kids. Now, in the United States, the poor are supplemented. All these child tax credits and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of supplementing to the extent that some people aren't motivated to work in the United States. Why should they work if they've got checks coming in that are bigger than what they could possibly earn? So this idea of universal basic income actually is going to create a welfare state. Okay. It's going to create a welfare state. It's going to end up where people are relying on the government to provide their goods. Okay. When people start relying on the government develops much more power. And that's not a way we want to go. Okay. The government gets a lot of power when right now the people in the inner cities are completely reliant upon them. And they aren't getting married in a lot of cases. They're still having kids because the child tax credits and all those kind of benefits they get from the kids. So this idea of the $1,400 check that's coming to us, this probably needs to be the last time the government sends us a check. We should not endorse universal basic income. It's just making people more reliant on the government, and it's going to make some people not work. And what do you do when you don't work? You don't feel like you have a purpose? Well, a lot of people do a lot of pretty bad things to themselves. Okay, end up in the gutter, drugged up and all that kind of stuff. And so we want to encourage work, hard work, and achievement. That's very important. So trying to see what is this stripper liquors talking about? Oh, Converse Contender's back. So you guys, actually, I have put this out there. This is a free-for-all today. I'm probably going to go for a little while longer if anyone wants to join me. Just go ahead and I put the link there in case anyone's interested. But anyway, so that's one of the things. A lot of times we don't want to get totally reliant upon the government. Why is this light doing that to me? Okay, so that's just something that I just wanted to mention today. And the other thing that I was mentioning had to do with politics and the things. So does anyone have any questions or thoughts or comments that you want me to mention? Anything you want to say? You want to make sure you get aired? So you can see here. Okay, so we've got some good people in the chat. I want to say hi. Converse is back. Stripper Liquor's in here. Thank you, Jesus. Stripper Liquor. Thank you, Jesus. What a great name. Oh, Converse is back in here. Here we go. Hello, Converse. How's your haircut?
Hey, it's Jay. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. They do a good job today?
Yeah, they did a good job. You're gonna hear some background noise with me. So just so you know.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's funny because I took my sons to get a haircut and they both got a haircut from two different people at this barbershop a couple of weeks ago. And the person who cut my youngest son's hair took like no time. He did it in something like 5 minutes. And the one who cut my older son's hair took much longer time. And so my younger son was really mad. He's like, "You didn't take as much time on my hair." He was like,
yeah. Actually, somebody called while she was cutting my hair. I was like, "Hey, they scheduled me with the other girl. I won't let nobody else touch my kid's hair," and stuff like that. So I found that pretty funny. Some people are really
that is
worried.
funny. Yeah, the kids at my kids' school, they have this style now where it's really long on the top of the hair and then it's short on the sides and the back.
Oh yeah, yep. That is pretty popular now. So, but I actually drummed up some business in there too, because I built her this big barn door for her. Like, she has this really big opening, and Lowe's and other stores don't sell custom sized barn doors. And so I made one like from scratch years ago. And she's like, every time somebody comes in here, they ask about the door. That's what she's been telling me. And then she's like, as soon as I sat down, this guy that was sitting in the other seat started asking about it, like, about how awesome that door was. And she's like, "This is the guy that built it." And he's like, "What? Dude, I need 3 built."
Oh, cool.
But I'm about to have hernia surgery. So I gotta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have to push that out at least 6 weeks, but at least that's going to be, help me pay for the surgery, and my wife's pregnant too. So we got a lot of bills coming due.
Oh yeah. That's good. Blaster Master says, "Why don't teachers deserve to be paid more?" I actually do believe that teachers do deserve to be paid more. I think it's absurd how low they're paid in Florida, to be honest. I mean, their average starting salary for a teacher in Florida is around 40 or 45,000, and that's just ridiculous. So, and even college professors, that totally varies as a function of which major you're in. So I'm paid pretty well. I actually am paid, I would say really well, but because I'm in business. And then you have other college professors teaching history and underwater basket weaving, and they don't get paid that much.
It's like Dave Ramsey used to say, like, don't be surprised if you spend $200,000 to get a degree in lesbian dance theater and don't find a job after or something. But
that's what we do. Like we used to post signs outside of our doors that talk about average starting salaries for your particular majors. And I know they're not doing that in art history.
Are you familiar with the research on charter schools at all?
I'm not. I'm for charter schools, though. I'm definitely for them. But
Yeah,
what does the research say?
well, I haven't seen all the research. Just keep that in mind. I just was reading some articles on it about a year or so ago, and I was just gonna ask you, do they get to up the pay of the teachers? Because I'm not sure about that, but I did see like some data that said like they were performing like higher than state schools, and
I've
part
seen
of the
that too.
reason, yeah, I've seen a documentary that after that I kind of looked it up and seen a documentary, and like this teachers, because they were paid as private teachers instead of state teachers, they would actually go and like knock on the kid's door and be like, "Why aren't you in class?" And stuff like that, and it's like
Wow.
harder hit
No,
areas
I've
with
heard
like poverty and things like that. I think it could really help.
that's one of the things that I hold against Democrats, because Democrats don't like charter schools because it takes away from some of their control over what's in the curriculum. And I think that's disgusting. I think that's like Big Brother. The charter schools, from what I hear, are doing really well,
Hmm.
and I think it's the market demands as far as how much the teachers make in private schools. I've known teachers to make less in private schools, in certain private schools, than public, but then in other ones, like over in South Florida where I came from, I'm trying to remember the name of this one school, they were making a lot more. They were like 80,000. So
I think one of the biggest arguments that I read was that in state schools it's really hard to fire a teacher, and you really have to prove a lot to show that a teacher is neglectful or like not not good at their job or whatever. Um,
mhm.
and in charter schools, right, it's based on performance, and
Yeah,
so that, yeah, I mean, I've seen some good and some bad, but one of the funniest things is I remember hearing about
wait, say it. You're kind of going in and out a little bit.
somebody arguing against charter schools, and their critique was that, well, you can't have them every. Oh,
You
sorry.
can't have them
I
everywhere.
remember hearing a critique of charter schools from somebody like in a newspaper or something, and it basically said like, well, you can't have charter schools everywhere. It's like
Yeah,
everywhere. Like that's not a
that's
good
a
argument against charter schools.
I don't think that's a good argument. There's a couple charter schools in my area that look like they're pretty good. They attract some. I mean, it's a good thing. I'm in the neighborhood I'm in though, because we're A schools in the neighborhood, so I'm kind of like pretty happy with the public schools here. But there's a question from Oliver. He says, "SJ, what are your thoughts on socialized systems within capitalist countries?" Actually, every country has some socialism. Every country has a level of socialism. Like our K through 12, firefighters, policemen, infrastructure, that's socialized, if you want to call it that. The government controls that. But it's the degree of control that the government has. So we're all a mix.
Yeah, well,
So
also
nobody's
it depends
fully free
on,
market.
yeah, it also depends on like how you define it, right? Because some people would just define socialism that the workers have the means of control of, so um, if that's what you mean, then like you can have worker co-ops in a capitalist country,
Hmm.
and we do, right?
Yeah, and technically, if you work for a publicly traded company and you own a bunch of the stock, you've got some control of that company. What you don't want to do, and see some of these people who formulate some of these theories, like Vaush and that, what they seem to think is that some entrepreneur is going to go through all the hassle and toil and hard work of forming a company and getting it going, and suddenly having 50 employees, and then the employees are going to take over and kick them out. That's absurd. Who is going to want to be an entrepreneur in such an environment?
Yeah, so I do watch some of Bausch's stuff, and he does seem to say that at some point, some arbitrary metric of performance, when you get so big that this, then we seize control of the company and give it to the workers.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I just don't.
I just
The thing is with founders, there's a way to distinguish this. There's a study that I looked at where it's kind of an older study, but they looked at a bunch of companies and they looked at the ones that were performing 3 times better than the market on average over an extended period of time. And they found some commonalities. And one of them is that when they were hiring the replacement of the initial founder who was the CEO, when they have this good succession plan, those who had promoted from within did way better than those who brought in people from the outside. And so those who hired guns from the outside, because in a lot of the cases, the people, just like Sam Walton did a really good job for Walmart. And then all of a sudden they hired these big guns from the outside who paid themselves millions of dollars versus what Walton was doing. And the values are different. So, but I'm just trying to throw out there, one of the things that they talk in my field about is high performance work system characteristic. And one of those is hiring and promoting from within. And so from inside the company.
Yeah, that's interesting. I followed a lot of business and sales people for a long time because I used to work in sales, and I help run a business now that I'm going to take over within the next couple of years. And so I'm always following these business principles, and one guy I listen to, he says that whenever things are really, he feels like things aren't moving forward, they're really being held up. He says that it seems bad to think and say this, but I'm looking for who's holding me up. And he goes, if you really look into it, sometimes, like he says, I can just fire one guy, and he was slowing down the whole production because he's like secretly didn't care for us or like our company or the people that he worked with. So like he was like purposely like slowing things down.
Yeah, that's I was mentioning this when you were getting your hair cut, as I was talking about.
Like, if I'm, unable to fire a person like that.
Oop, you just went on mute. That's the 17 or 18%, depending on the year, of people who have malicious intentions against your organization. There are people who will intentionally slow other people down. Like, we have 2 rock stars at my school, and a couple of people actually went up to him and told him to slow down on how much research they're putting out because it's making everybody else look bad. And that's ridiculous that people said that to them. So Converse is, yeah.
Yeah. Have you talked about sorry, I think there's a lag for me, but I'm about to be at home, so it'll go away. But anyway, have you talked about the Pareto distribution that Peterson and others talk about?
Yeah, I know I didn't talk about that today. What do you think about that? So 20% of people are giving you most of the hassle. Well, 80% of the hassle.
Yeah, well, what seems to be really interesting about it is that it doesn't just apply to, I don't have my notes on me, but it seems to not just apply to like workers, right? It's like 20% of the star.
You're kind of dropping out a little bit. Say it again. You just dropped out just a little. So somehow you dropped out a little bit, Converse. Well, I'll say it's like the squeaky wheel. It's the squeaky wheel idea where there are always going to be people who are just not putting in the right amount of work and complaining a lot, and that's really unfortunate. Shoot, Converse is somehow dropped out here. Yeah, Jamie says it applies everywhere. Oh, you're back. Converse, somehow I can't hear you. Okay, well, yes. Well, that's the thing. There's a book that my dean actually bought me once called Move Your Bus. And in the Move Your Bus book, it talks a lot about different types of employees. And I mentioned how there's there's a group of different employees. You've got 30% highly engaged. That book says to really focus on the 30% of highly engaged employees and to not pay so much attention to the big squeaky wheels who have malicious intentions against your organization. You don't want to pay that much attention to them, because if you're devoting your efforts to them, they're really not going to get any better. But by identifying the right people in your positions. Right sizing is what they call it, or promoting from within and identifying hard workers who are really doing a good job for your company and paying them more and recognizing them and giving them Employee of the Month awards and things like that. You set them up as a role model that other people now are going to want to try to emulate. And so that ends up being a positive thing that happens. So I want to say hi to Marshall Sharp, Stripper Liquor, Jamie Russell, and Isaiah 53 Learning. Good to see you guys. So thank you for coming in today. And so let's see if Converse is back a little bit, kind of going in and out. So he might be waiting a little bit. So yeah, so the bottom line is I'm in the middle, okay? I'm not, some people think of me, I'm in the middle politically, okay? So I can see arguments on both sides. Like I actually looked at the immigration thing from two perspectives. On some perspective, I wonder, why is it that the Republicans are so concerned? Like, why is that their number one concern, immigration? And then I look at it from the other perspective, from the Republicans. They say, well, wait a second, look, the number of kids in these shelters that were supposed to be eliminated has actually doubled. And so they're very worried about that kind of thing. And they're worried about these people coming in. Now, there's the Democrats, and a lot of the Democrats, going to moral foundations theory, focused on care, want to let in all of these people from other countries, and they're welcoming them. And one of the reasons is self-serving. One of the reasons is because they realize that maybe in the next generation, when they have kids, those kids will vote for the Democrats because the Democrats open the doors to them. And so that's something that we're seeing. So the Republicans focusing on law and order, and that's another thing that they focus on according to moral foundations, and this idea of authoritarianism and loyalty and that sort of thing. Republicans call them illegals, which I talked about yesterday as not being a very friendly term. You don't refer to a person as an illegal, just like with the baby's a person. Anyway, so, okay. And I'm mentioning unborn babies is actually what I was specifically mentioning. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here, you guys. I was having a little trouble with Converse's sound there, but he was traveling. So I think we're going in and out a little bit, but I wanted to say thank you to everybody who came in here today. Please like and subscribe and do come again. I haven't heard of what Eric Weinstein says. No, actually, I have not heard that, but I just listened to Brett Weinstein talk to Jordan Peterson, part of that conversation, and I realized that Brett Weinstein sounds like he's an atheist. I don't know. I haven't looked at his religious affiliations, but he sounded like an atheist, and so I thought that was kind of interesting. He kept trying to smuggle in his ideas on evolution to try to smuggle out God, and it was pretty obvious when he was talking. Oh, Eric is his brother. Okay. What he said on immigration, I have not seen it. Well, there's the danger of immigration too, is if most countries have borders and have this idea that you can't just freely go into them. But our country actually was founded on this idea that you could just freely come into it. So we have to have arguments on that. Oh, Converse is back. Hey, Converse.
Hey, sorry about that.
Oh, now you sound a lot better.
Yeah, I just got home, so I switched to my computer.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. So what do you think about the Pareto principle? I could kind of hear you, but you were going a little bit in and out before.
Oh, yeah. So it's just like a distribution principle, right? Like I'm not any type of specialist or expert on it or anything, but what I was saying earlier is it seems to be something from, I guess you could say, nature, right? Because it doesn't just apply to workers. It applies to all kind of things, like the 20% of the stars are grouped in clusters and things like that in galaxies, and you find it you find it in all kind of different things in nature. I hope I didn't say that the wrong way because it's been a while, but there are all these different examples that you find throughout nature, not just in workplace environments. But what I was going to say is it seemed to me when I'm thinking about it that would be an interesting argument for, against a communist or socialist, that what if this is something that occurs in nature, but you want to make the workplace all about everybody completely,
equality of outcomes.
Yeah, equality of outcome, right? Instead of equality of opportunity. If it is true that this is something found in nature that naturally happens, then it just seems like, we should we should favor a system that allows for the performance of the best.
I do a little thought experiment in my class, and I just say to them, I say, now think about it this way, because I actually talk about incentives and I talk about motivation and that kind of thing. And it's human to be motivated to work harder if you want to earn more. It's just something that's natural within us. And it's dehumanizing and demotivating for everyone to make the same, regardless of your input. So that's why the giving kids trophies, all the kids trophies on a team, just actually demotivates them in the long run. Because why perform really hard when everyone's recognized equally? And so that's there. Just to say one more thing on that. So I tell my students, I say, well, imagine this. So, and one professor actually did this to their students, but they said, okay, imagine this. If I tell you that everybody takes a test, and then no matter what your performance is, I'm going to give you all C's. Okay, so what's going to happen? Well, your lowest performers are going to be cheering. They're going to be like, sweet, your F students, and then your A students and your B students are going to reduce their work. And that's exactly what happened in any country that's communist, that doesn't have free markets in place. So
yeah, well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's like, you get to see it in real time, right, happening. And I think business owners do too, right, with their employees. And there's a study done on the patterns of shoppers, that's seen that approximately, because these are never exact numbers, right, but approximately 20% of the customers, I guess, that shopped at that store account for 80% of the store's sales. That's what I was meaning by it's far more than just employees, right?
that's interesting. Yeah.
Or sorry, my neighbor's pulling up. So let me just, sorry about that. My neighbor just pulled up, but
no worries. That's when the horn blower comes around. The lawn guy always comes around when I'm running streams.
I was about to say, I didn't hear any leaf blowers or anything today on your end.
Oh, you heard it before? You could hear the leaf blower in the background.
It's Friday. Where are they at?
Yeah. Oh, they were here. They were here at I think they were here at the beginning, and then they went somewhere. So yeah.
So you're mainly talking about politics today, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about other stuff too.
Well, no, it doesn't matter. I was just wondering if there's a specific topic to your stream. But one thing that here's another one. So I just looked up my notes on it, and this a study on software engineering found that roughly 20% of the modules cause 80% of the operational faults. And a study that analyzed circulation patterns in libraries found that around 20% of a library's books account for 80% of its circulation.
Wow.
These are really interesting to see how common this distribution, the Pareto distribution, is. Yeah,
no, that's really, really interesting. Yeah, and so Stripper Liquor says Weinstein Peterson is worth listening to twice. I did see Jonathan Pageau on Peterson. That was really good too. And so, Jamie says I don't know if Jamie's a female or male, actually, because I've known Jamie's of both, so I don't know. But Jamie says, I like Jonathan Haidt too. So yeah, I definitely like Jonathan Haidt. And so
oh yeah, I do too. Yeah, I like all those guys. Yeah.
So what do you have plans for the weekend? I've got my kids are on spring break this week.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I got a birthday party to go to tomorrow. So I'll do that, but I'm working on some videos tonight, and that I'm going to probably put out soon. One's going to be kind of a funny video that I don't want to give it away, but it's going to be a humorous video with inspiring philosophy. So yeah, you might be interested in that. And then I'm trying to finish up some furniture builds that I'm doing, because I'm gonna have surgery next Friday, and so I won't be able to lift anything over 25 pounds for 6 weeks.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
well, that's cool.
Yeah, that's what I'll be up to. What about you guys? The kids are off, so
yeah, the kids are off. we were thinking about going out to eat today, later today. So we've gone out probably 3 times or 4 times since the pandemic. So we were thinking sit outside at this one place that's brand new that's on the water on the Alafaya River. So we might do that today.
Yeah. Well, you might be interested to get on Discord, SJ. We have a lot of conversations on there, and most of them aren't like recorded or live or anything. So you really get to kind of work through issues and not like people just I guess like showboating or like trying to posture.
Yeah.
And so you can have more honest conversations sometimes.
What's the name of your Discord? Because I actually have a Discord and I've been on it a couple of times, but I never see any conversations going when I get on there. So
it's not on mine, right? There are like these main. So like you have to go. I can send you some links, but you have to join some of the big ones like Destiny's server, and there's one called Politics, which is a guy named Doobie that he runs the Politics server, and depending on which server you're in, like in Destiny server, you'll have more like educated like people. On Doobie server, you'll have like a lot of educated people too, but you're more likely on that server, the second, to run into like neo-Nazis or like, people that just have horrendous views. And so I like to go on there sometimes and just like challenge them and be like, why would this be the case? And then just see how they like backpedal it all. But yeah,
that's true. You mentioned that a little bit before when you said you went down to the south of South Carolina and you found kind of backwater people. And the sad thing is we've got a lot of those kind of backwater people in the South. And I know from living in the South all these years and from going through Georgia and northern Georgia especially, there's definitely some people with some archaic views.
Yeah, well, and I would say though that it seems just in my experience to be more hype than it actually is in reality. So what I mean by that is like I've only ran into a handful of those people in my entire life, So while there may be a higher distribution in the South than other places, I still think that it's still rather low. There may be some people that are just like tribalistic, of course, but like this is something I've pointed out before in the discussion I had where like I was listening to one guy, a white man, talk about, not wanting his daughters to, marry somebody that's not white. Right. And then he was being like talked about like as if like he was a really bad person. Right. And then I talk about the rapper Common, who I like, and the guy I was with really liked, and I'm like, yeah, and then it just like registered me like this song that Common has where he's like, when I see black men walking with white women on their arm, I look mad at them as if I know their mom. And so I guess what I'm pointing out with that is that these tribalistic tendencies seem a lot worse in the case of the white man not wanting his daughter to date outside her race, right? But in the other cases where it's like, Muhammad Ali even said, why wouldn't you want your kids to look like you? That's weird, and stuff like that. We don't look at that and go, well, he's really prejudiced and he's like a bad guy or whatever, so I think that we have to like be consistent. And I think sometimes that's the hardest part is like finding people that are going to be consistent,
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So we've got Danny here to say hello. Yeah, because
Yes,
it's
hello.
consistency. If you don't allow racism for white people, you shouldn't allow racism for black people. I mean, it's just kind of basic.
Right.
So Danny, you've been on my channel before, right?
Yeah, I think this is my 3rd time.
Yeah. So welcome.
Hey, Danny. I was hoping to get in touch with you. Is there a way to get in touch with you on Discord or email or something like that?
Yeah, what do you prefer, Discord or email?
Discord's fine. I just didn't have your number on
I'll put
there.
my tag in private chat, okay?
Okay, sure, yeah. Because I was hoping to have you on for some debates in the future.
Yeah, so
that sounds fun. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Converse, are you still doing moderation for Modern Day Debate?
Oh yeah, mostly what I'm doing right now is just helping to set up debates. I do still moderate, like, but you know, I don't know. It's just since we have other people that can moderate, it's easier for me to just to help James like set up debates and stuff like that. And but sometimes I do, especially if I set up like the debate, like both partners and like what it's going to be about and everything. I'll end up moderating that debate, just to like totally take it off James' plate, you know. But
Wait, so how did you hear of me? Did you see me like cause trouble in other streams or something?
well, no, I mean I know of you from like Discord, and then Godless Girls chats and
Oh,
stuff like
okay.
that, and I've seen you on here before, but I remember you from back in Godless Girls Discord and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I've been plaguing Speed of Sound stream, so I don't know if there's like some stuff there I didn't know if you heard about or you saw.
Well, let me ask
but-
you this, because people were confused in one of the streams you were in, not on Discord but on YouTube. You're an atheist?
Yeah, something like that. I'm just really interested in the argument. I'm interested in philosophy. I don't really like to debate for theism or against it, but I mean, like, but yeah, if I'm forced to defend something, I would be atheism. But I kind of like on YouTube, I get along with Christians much better than I get along with atheists. All the atheists hate me right now.
Yeah, so that's
Really?
why I was asking. Yeah, because it's funny because he was in one of Nathan Orman's streams, and he was arguing with Doug from Pine Creek and Danny. Like after like a couple minutes of trying to get through to Doug, was like, "You don't seem like an honest interlocutor." And then they found it hard to believe that you were holding the position that you're arguing for, and so they said, there's got to be some underlying reason why he's
I
trying to
know
hold on to this.
it was so
But-
crazy to me.
But they were implying that it's because you're a theist.
Yeah, no.
And then somebody in the
everyone thought I
comments
was a
go,
theist.
he's not a theist.
Yeah, everyone thinks I'm a theist because I argue. I think that a lot of arguments that are presented by YouTube atheists are pretty bad arguments, right? And I'm a non-naturalist, right? So there's like this unfortunate tie between naturalism and atheism, and that I'm not for at all, right? So there's a bunch of naturalists because I think naturalism is self-defeating. I think it's completely indefensible, and most of them are naturalists. So then I naturally debate them on naturalism. And they get really angry, right? So, that's what ends up happening. And then people confuse me for a theist because I'm arguing against atheists. But no, I'm pretty much atheist.
That's the thing. Pine Creek Doug and Nathan, those two go hand in hand. I mean, they're like Pine Creek and Pine.
I don't know why that is to SJ. SJ Pine Creek is a numbskull, right? A philosophical numbskull, right? I don't know. He might be a nice person. Like he could babysit my kids, and I would trust him with them, right? But I'm not. So I'm not talking about his person, right? Like, but I'm talking about the sorts of arguments he forwards, his line of reasoning, his attitude towards religious belief. I hate it all. I hate it all, right? Because I'm a pragmatist when it comes to religious belief. I think that if it's the case, let's just pretend. I know most people are Christians on the stream. Let's just pretend Christianity is false. I know that you don't believe that. Doesn't really matter for the point I'm about to make. That doesn't mean you shouldn't believe it, right? On my view, if it benefits your life, if you think that you are more motivated in life, that you live healthier, and then I think you should believe it, even though I think it's false. I'm not going to dismantle. My parents are Christians. All right, I'm not going to dismantle what I take to be false, right? Because I know it means a lot to them, right? So that's my perspective. I know we're granting that Christianity is false. I know that's contentious, but these people, right, are hyenas for Christianity, no matter what, right? I don't understand, right? That it's not simply that they're arguing against Christianity; they hate it, right? And they hate it, man. Like, and I'm like, why? Well, because it's brought damage to my life. Well, okay, I'll grant you that there are some people that are less happy because of Christianity. It's not a religion about happiness, by the way. Okay, but there's plenty of people that are far more happy on Christianity than not. And why are you ignoring that set of people, right? Why don't you treat people like individuals, right? From an atheist perspective, right? If it benefits them, what's the problem right here? You see, Nietzsche, right? I've said this like 5 times. Like Nietzsche was critical of people that treated truth as a value. I know Christians and Platonists, and there was a whole tradition in philosophy that treated truth as a value. Nietzsche wasn't just against Christianity; he was against truth as being put on a pedestal, right? And I completely agree with him. Right now, I know y'all don't, but I'm just get in my mind for a second. The point is that these people care so much more about the truth as atheists when they're ignoring that there can be false beliefs that benefit one's life and get through kind of the rough edges in life, right? Nietzsche was like, look, don't be like the Christians here, right? Don't put science or truth on a pedestal to where you just ruin your life, right? And that's kind of the side I'm on, and so I don't really take pleasure in causing doubts in Christians. I don't take pleasure in
Yeah.
in
So
in any of that.
yeah.
Whereas
So
Pine Creek, admittedly, Pine Creek said word for word he enjoys instilling doubt in Christians. I don't enjoy that. That's
I've heard him
painful.
say that. Yeah, that's horrible. I mean, let me first, before we go on, I wanted to have Jamie introduce himself. I don't know if Jamie's been on my channel before, but I've seen him in the stream before.
Hi. Yeah.
Hey, Jamie.
Yeah. I have not been on before.
Jamie's a friend of mine. So.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Danny's a good. He's our neighborhood philosopher. He comes in all the time in some of the other open mic streams, and it's very helpful, and has a channel on based on philosophy. And
yeah, I'm a graduate student in philosophy, so I've gotten my bachelor's in philosophy. But my channel, it's oriented towards education and debates, and it's not oriented towards atheism. So if you're a Christian and you're hearing this, yeah, I've interviewed some atheist philosophers. I'm going to interview some theistic philosophers, but there are other videos that just teach you the basics of philosophy. And nothing. It's not going to be a kind of channel where I'm focusing on atheism like that. There's too much of that anyway. So it's just educational. If you're interested, you should subscribe.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Let me ask you a question about, like, what do you think about this? Because when I've been talking on Discord lately, right, and I'm talking to people, I feel like the majority of what people are saying that are, like, let's say non-believers, I feel like the majority of non-believers, that all they're saying seems to be, you don't prefer my preferences. And what I mean by that is, like, it seemed like almost every facet, right? Like, we talk about this term bigoted, right? They were calling somebody a bigot because they only like, their preference toward, really, well, they were talking about something crude about, like, pornography, right? That straight people not liking to watch trans, that they're bigoted for that or something. And it seemed to me that all they were really saying at the end of the day was, you should prefer things that aren't your preferences.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that
inclined
seems
to
odd.
agree with you. I'm inclined to agree with you that well, I take my moral view is a hybrid view. So I think obligations are agent centered, but I think value is in the world. So I have a hybrid view. But if we're just focusing on obligations, yeah, I don't really know what people mean when they tell me that I should do something if I don't have a reason to do it. I just don't know what they're talking about, right? And so if now I understand when a Christian tells me I should do something, that they're just saying that God commands that I not do that, or that I command this, or that, or God commands this, or this is in line or out of accord with God's desires. That's typically what they mean. But yeah, I mean, when I try to, if I tell someone that they should do something, I'm doing one of two things, right? I'm telling them that they have a reason to do something. So that's just an empirical question. Hey, don't drink that wine, it's poisoned. What I'm saying, you shouldn't drink the wine. All that means is that I know that if you know that there's poison in the wine, that would serve as a reason not to drink the wine. Okay. Or else I'm just manipulating them, right? I'm just saying you shouldn't do X in an effort to, like, trick them into not doing X or something. But that's, like, the only two contexts where I think I can make sense of it. Otherwise, it's just like, it's no different than a sport when, like, if the idea is that in a sport, like in a basketball game, right? Is it true that well, if you take one side of the team, right, they think they should score on the other goal, and they don't want the other team to score, but that doesn't serve as a reason for the team to not score, obviously, just because they don't want them to score, right? And that's how I kind of see morality, aside from what I just stipulated, right? And so I get what you're saying. There is a niceness to Christianity in the sense that it seems like God's commands are reason giving, Like if I knew that God existed and if he commanded me to do X, it seems like that serves as a reason for me to do something. Okay. And that might be something like almost, for lack of a better word, tangible to grab onto in terms of morals. And so from your perspective, when you hear someone tell you you should do something, right? You understand that they're not talking about God's desires. They're not talking about God's commands. So what are they talking about besides what they want? Right. So I kind of understand the intuition.
I just want to say to piggyback on some of what you're saying. One of the things that I think actually gives us a lot of evidence of God is the fact that we have this moral law and it transcends populations, and we know that we know innately, like within us, in our conscience, that we should tell the truth and we should be just and honorable and fair and all those kind of good traits. And this is something that goes across generations and across people, and so it follows to me that must mean we have a moral lawgiver.
Yeah, we could have a whole debate on this, SJ. I have to leave in 15 minutes, but
Yeah.
the point, I will meet you halfway here, that if there is a God, there is something to my moral life in terms of what I should do. I'll meet you halfway in the sense I would just take God's commands to be reason giving, right? And I think that's kind of what you're saying. I think you're making a little bit more claims than what I'm saying, but I think that the idea that if God does exist, a lot of people would change the way they act, right? And that tells you something about the nature of God in terms of like how people view it in terms of their moral life,
Yeah. Jamie, did you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. I've been thinking about it too. I think SJ is right as far as the intuitive sense of it, for one, and the existence of the idea of morality. But also, I think when I listen to like kind of like the Sam Harris, Matt Dillahunty type, and they want to argue that all the different popular atheists, they say morality, like the ones that hold to objective morality but don't believe in God, and then they appeal to, well, in any given circumstance, there's a greatest possible outcome for the flourishing of sentient life or something. So I find myself agreeing with that concept, in the sense that, well, yeah, even if you suggest that God didn't exist, there would probably be a best way, and I wonder if that's a problem for the moral argument for God, which I like and find it compelling.
Yeah, I don't. That's consequentialism, and that's saying that you're grounding God, you're grounding a source in a consequence, and so it has circular reasoning, and that's why that's inherently flawed.
The circular reasoning being that
because you're saying the source of the moral law is also your desire for a certain consequence, and so it's circular.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's right. I just like, why does God? God is good, and so I guess that's the moral ground of it, his character, right? So,
well, yeah, he's the standard of goodness. So it's not, because it's like that's another thing. A lot of people like to use the Euthyphro dilemma and try to say that it's, God is, it basically looks at God in two different ways, but it both ignores the third option, which is that God is actually the standard of goodness and the standard of righteousness. And he's the goalpost to which we're aiming.
Yeah, I think that makes sense also if you kind of consider God as like the unmoved mover, or the non-contingent source, or whatever. So if you need that, we were talking about this last night, actually, Danny was there too, but I think if God is the necessary being for existence, so to speak, then it also makes sense, or it kind of helps me, at least. Maybe I'm just not thinking correctly, but it seems to add support to the idea that if the source is a personal agent, then it makes sense that morality would flow from that.
Here's my issue with it. With just, well, maybe without getting too deeply into it, this is I guess I can phrase it as a question or pose an issue. The idea is, where does motivation play into morality? Okay, that's like the killer question in ethics, right? Can you be obligated to do something if you have no motivation to do it? And moral realists are going to say yes, that you can be obligated to do something despite having no motivation to do it. Zero. Not like it. And I'm just not, I just don't get it, right? That the idea that if I should do something, if I understand that that's what that means, is something like I have a reason to do it, and if I understand reasons as motivational, I think that if some moral statement is true, then there is a motivation, right? And I think that that's where someone like me and like divine command theorist of a sort, or even people like Kant, Mill, or a deontologist, are just gonna like butt heads. Like they're gonna say, well, no, you should do X. You don't have to be motivated to do X for that to be true. And I'm saying, I don't understand that. I don't know what it means to say you should do X if I'm not motivated to do it. And that's kind of like the heart of the issue for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're building on something that goes to things like intuition, reasoning, and conscience. And so the idea of motivation, I would argue that everyone has motivations to do one thing or another. You might be motivated to pursue hedonistic interests, and you're told instead that you should be pursuing things that are more selfless, and your motivations are to go against that. And so, but the one thing that a lot of people who look at these kind of theories, like moral foundations theories, they look at the idea that we all have these intuitions to do certain things and to act in certain ways, and we have reasoning, and so we reason with ourselves, and the marriage of those actually comes together with our conscience. Our conscience helps us to decide exactly what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes our intuition might say, hey, don't go jump in that pond to save that little kid who's about to be gobbled up by an alligator. But our conscience tells us you better go into that pond and sacrifice your life, to rescue the kid from the alligator. So that's the way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wouldn't it be rational to do that?
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
Wouldn't rationality suggest you should preserve your genes or whatever, and not risk yourself to save the kid, but yet something compels you to do it?
Yeah,
I think
something
that's
compels you to do it. That's your conscience.
Yeah, and that seems not that evolutionary theory just seems to fall short. I mean, maybe that's just an intuition too, but
Right. I'm an atheist, and I'm telling you, evolution does just not play a role for me in ethics at all. It just doesn't. Right. There's
And it
there's a
shouldn't,
whole
because it's a moral prescription. A lot of these are moral prescriptions, not descriptions, and evolution can only explain descriptive things.
I totally agree with you, SJ. Right now, but to what you were saying, I think a lot of what you said does cohere with what I was saying. I'll give you my view, because I deconverted a couple years ago, and my view of ethics when I was a Christian was something like this: that God creates human beings in a way where they find his commands or his desires at the least a reason to act in a certain way. Not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily determine your action, but it at the least serves as some kind of reason to act one way over another. And that was my view when I was a Christian on ethics, on Christian morality.
Right, but wouldn't you agree that like there are certain defeaters to that because of like the fall, for example? It'd be a theological kind of explanation.
Well, okay,
because of yeah, go ahead.
No. Well, I have to be careful, because I'm saying that it serves as a reason, not the prime. It doesn't like control what you do, right? So let's say you have a sinful nature, which means you have desires or motivations oriented towards sin. But the point is that, and this is biblically, I think, supported, the idea that there's this struggle between the spirit and the flesh, right? Okay. The idea is that your desires or motivations from the spirit are only there in virtue of God making you that way, the imago Dei, right? The image of God, right? But it competes with the other side, right? And the point is that, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I think that is the case, right? Especially initially, right? And then, but you got to keep in mind verses that seem to say that at some point God gives you over when you fight it too long and you just suppress the truth, and he just gives you over to it at some point, right? Like Romans 9.
Yeah, like in the homosexual case, right, where he gives them over to their desires. I think what that means is, yeah, like you said, initially there might be this initial motivation to do what's in line with God's commands or God's desires, but then when you consistently choose or rule against those motivations, it might disappear, right? That's the idea of a habit, or the idea of falling completely away. So I think that's compatible with what I'm saying, at least my previous view of Christian morality. The idea, though, is that it's what I'm saying. That view of Christian morality is compatible with moral anti-realism, right? The idea is that God creates you in a way where you have motivations to be in line with His will, but so that's where the ought comes from, right? That motivation that He's instilled in you. Okay, it doesn't necessarily that His commands are only part of the picture. It's not the whole picture in terms of what explains why you should do something, right? That the commands are seen as valuable, but God's constructed you in a way where you can see them as valuable.
Well, now I think you're waffling a little bit,
Okay.
or cherry picking, in the sense that, of course, I'm judging you because I know you're a determinist ultimately, but
Yeah,
but
I'm a
you're
determinist.
and so SJR, what's your position on that sort of thing? Are you a Calvinistic type Christian? Are you I can't recall.
No, I'm not. I definitely am not. I'm not supporting of that, and I'm not, because I think that Calvinists have this view where they try to put God into our time frame and say God preordained all this stuff, and they don't realize that God's concurrently in our past, present, and future. So our idea of what happens before and after is not consistent with what God is.
Yeah, I don't buy compatibilism, even, really, not fully anyway.
Yeah, I'm a compatibilist, and I don't know how that would fit in Christianity very well. Like if I was
with
Go ahead.
Molinism, right? What wouldn't you say that was a bridge?
Well,
I don't
Molinism is quite clever, but I think that what Molinism does for me is that it reconciles foreknowledge and human free will pretty well. I think better than all the other views. Okay, but I don't think it gets you out of the problem of evil. And I don't think that it addresses my concerns about libertarian free will. The idea of Molinism is that it sort of grants already libertarian free will, right? If you're going to criticize Molinism, you could still criticize Molinism without criticizing libertarian free will. The idea is that Molinism presupposes libertarian free will, at least on my view.
It's like a defense of it. I think that might be historically the case.
It's a defense of God's knowledge and reconciled with the idea that your freedom is not determined, right?
Yeah, he developed it to preserve God's sovereignty and the freedom of man's will.
But it presupposes libertarian free will. It's not an argument for libertarian free will. It's to show that, look, there's this thing called middle knowledge, and we can reconcile libertarian free will, something like that, and God's knowledge and His sovereignty. But I think that if you want to attack libertarian free will, you don't need to attack Molinism, right? You just attack libertarian free will.
Oh,
See,
sure.
I look at it. I look at it this way, because Molinism, I just easily remember it by saying, okay, God knows what you will, would, and could do in varying circumstances. And so He puts you in certain situations. And I believe that God definitely plays a hand in our lives. I'm not trying to say that He doesn't. And I also believe that right now God knows whose names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. I'm very certain of that. And I know it because God's like the author of a book. We're in the middle of the book. We're in some chapters, and He knows exactly how the book's going to end. Because he's that's how I kind of look at God.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I have to go soon. SJ, I put the link of my channel in the private chat. If you want to, I don't know, do whatever you want with it, but it would be nice. I just started in January, so it's rather new. So promotion would be great.
Can I put the link in the on the channel?
Oh, do whatever you want. Right, anything you want to do. Yeah, okay. But I appreciate it. I have to go. So and Converse, is it that I use Converse Contender and that number?
I think I just sent you one. I think I got through.
Yeah, go ahead and I'll go ahead and subscribe to your channel too. You guys go ahead and subscribe to everyone's channel here. Jamie, do you have a channel too?
Not yet, but I want to start a channel with Christian doctrine, whether it be debates or whatever, or just to work together with other Christians to work out doctrines and stuff. But I don't have a channel.
Cool. You're a Christian?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Yep. That makes it easy. So, well, listen, I'm probably going to have to go too, because it's coming on 2 hours. But I wanted to say, if you guys just go ahead and subscribe to everyone's channel here, Converse's and Danny's, and go ahead and follow them on Twitter if they're on Twitter. Are you guys on Twitter, Danny and Jamie? I know Converse, you can find him on Twitter.
No, I'm mostly on Discord. So, but you can email me through that channel that you linked. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, great. Stripper Looker's asking something. If God already knows, then how can there be any free will? And I just want to say that the idea is he knows what you're going to do, but he doesn't control you. He knows how the story is going to end. He knows how the book's, been, he knows from the authorship perspective of the book. So.
Yeah, that makes it totally possible. There's no logical contradiction with
Y'all take
foreknowledge and free will, I believe.
Yeah, good. Well, listen, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. But if you guys please, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you for coming on, everybody. Thank you for coming and listening. And Jamie, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.